All right. Good morning, everyone. Today, we're going to have Jonathan Sandmill from Steady Networks presenting cyber defense, tactics to protect your business from online security threats. Steady Networks has been accredited with us since February 2020, and this is their second webinar with us. And we're so grateful to have him here today. He has an excellent presentation ready for you, and I'm just going to go ahead and hand it over to him.
Thank you. Thanks, Victoria, and to Brian for having us come back and do an updated cyber defense and cybersecurity webinar. The topic that I'd love to talk about. Hopefully you are all ready to hear a few things that you can use and hopefully take back real world scenarios, real world tactics, things that you can really do in your personal life and your business life and protect yourself better out on the web. There's a lot of crazy information coming at us every day in the news about different cyber threats. And so we're going to explore how those things happen, what the defenses could be to help protect you, and even what to do in case you are the victim of one of these cyber attacks. So I'm going to start with this slide here and this little quote: hackers don't break in, they log in. And what that really means is that hackers aren't necessarily the guys in the hoodies in the basement pounding away with code trying to find vulnerabilities. What they're more often trying to do is get access to your username and password, or a valid username and password to get into networks. That's the easiest way, the path of least resistance. So there's a lot of things you can do to help protect your username and password, and that goes a really long way to protecting your identity, to protecting your data, to protecting your business out there as you have to conduct business on the internet like we all do. So let's get started. So cyber defense, this will be the structure, just to give you a brief rundown of what we're going to talk about, give you a couple of examples of things in the news, some of the latest statistics on cybersecurity, give you some recommendations. The way I like to present these recommendations is in an order of, to me, what is the most important and to the next most important. But the way I'm calculating that is some things have a huge impact and a low cost, some things have a huge impact and a high cost, some things have a low impact and a low cost, etc. We're trying to present the things that have the most impact compared to the lowest cost. And that's why I present them in this order. So if you kind of get these things in place, go down the list, you'll be in better shape. So the first one I want to talk about is backups. Really important, not necessarily the lowest cost, but one of the highest impact precautions you can take. Then we've got multi-factor authentication. The clicker's not working. Password management. Patching, updating, antivirus, cyber insurance, and phishing prevention. This is not a complete list. Others may disagree on the order of these lists, but they're all important. They all have a cost associated with them. So bear in mind that this is you can do this, you can do more, and we encourage people to do as much as they can to help protect their businesses and their personal data. And then happy to take questions along the way or at the end if you want to post those in the comment box. We'll answer as many questions as we can as well. All right, so a few examples. Some of you may have heard of this ransomware attack on the world's largest meat processor. They actually did, it sounded like a pretty good job responding to that. I don't think they ended up paying the ransom. But it did shut down some production, I think, in Brazil for a few days. And they may have had a bigger real world impact than we felt here in the US. There was a headline from a few days ago that ransomware attacks are closing schools, delaying chemotherapy, derailing everyday life. And this is really the theme that I'm hearing more and more, is things are moving from, affecting one business to really impacting our lives in the real world. So that's why cybersecurity has become such a critical topic for the government to tackle, is that it's really starting to bleed into the real world effects on everyday life. Colonial Pipeline, another huge impact, mostly on the East Coast, where it shut down a lot of gas stations, and there was some constraint for a few days. And this headline, Colonial Pipeline CEO paid ransom to swiftly restart pipeline. We're going to talk a little bit about why you would pay a ransom and why he likely paid the ransom of, I believe it was about $5 million, even though they had some security in place. So some trends, what are these hackers after these days? You can see this is so Verizon did a report just this year. They do it every couple of years where they analyze tens of thousands of different hacking events, try to cull some use actionable information. So that they've got data going back to 2016, and you can see the financial rewards of hacking is really on the rise. And a lot of that has to do with the value of Bitcoin, the anonymity of Bitcoin. That tactic of Bitcoin, we started seeing it at least 4 or 5 years ago, and it's become easier and easier for them to implement. And the rewards have become bigger and bigger as they've been able to hit bigger and bigger targets. Espionage had a little bump up in 2018, but really, the good news is they're just after your money. That's all they want. So if we can find ways to prevent from paying the ransom, that gets you, 80–90% of the way to protecting yourself. What's some other changing trends in patterns of breaches? You see this blue line that kind of squiggles and peaks up here pretty high as the primary tactic for hacking, which is social engineering. And we'll define social engineering, but you can see a lot of other types of hacking. It has gone down, and really the idea of social engineering is that why be that guy in the basement hacking away when you could just ask a user for their password and they'll give it to you. That's essentially what social engineering is and what it does, and that's why it's become such an effective tool for hacking. It's, again, that path of least resistance is always where they're going to go for first. So if you can protect yourself, be knowledgeable about how to prevent those kinds of attacks, you'll do yourself a huge favor. So a few definitions. Hacking is just that generic term for gaining unauthorized access to a system. Social attacks, social engineering, is the use of deception and manipulate individuals into divulging confidential or personal information that can be used for fraudulent purposes. So it's basically just tricking you into giving them your information. Malware, just a generic term. Viruses, worms, Trojans, these are all types of malware. Malware is sort of the all-encompassing term for that kind of software. Phishing, hopefully everyone knows what phishing is by now. Really common type of attack. We're going to get into some detail about it. And it's when a external hacker uses lots of different techniques to entice a user to click on a link or open an attachment that really they shouldn't be clicking on. And this is a new one that we're seeing a rise in, something called pretexting. And I'll give an example of that in a minute too, but it's creating a false narrative. You could think of this as really, a lot of times it's really a phone-based hack where they send you an email and say, call this number, or a number pops up on your computer screen and they say, oh, you got a virus, call us. A lot of this pretexting happens over the phone. So we'll talk a little bit about that, but no medium is safe from cyber hacking. They're going to try to get at you no matter what. From Kaspersky's website, I found this interesting study that over half of ransomware victims pay the ransom, but only a quarter see their full data returned. So that tells us couple of interesting things. One, that the hackers may not completely be acting in good faith when they say, if you pay us, we'll give you all your data back. So that's something to be aware of. But the other thing is that the users have a reason to pay. So let's talk about, why would you pay a ransom? If what they're basically doing is taking your own data hostage. So the only reason you would pay, the primary reason you would pay a ransom is because you don't have backups. So that's why backups ends up at the top of my list. Reason number two is that your backups failed, which is essentially the same thing as having no backups, except the difference is that you think you have backups. And reason number 3 is that backups will take too long to recover. And that's what we suspect happened in the Colonial Pipeline. They had good backups, but they thought it would take so long to restore the backups and get operational again that they thought it would be cheaper and faster for them to just pay the ransom. So there's some ethical questions as to whether or not that was the right decision, but I'm sure they were getting a lot of pressure from the government, from their customers to get the pipeline going again. So let's talk about a little bit of detail around my number 1 recommendation, which is backup management. And I use this word management, kind of put it in italics, because people don't always think of it in terms of something that has to be managed. But my theory is that no backup system is set it and forget it. There has to be a process involved to not just a program. Servers, if you're running businesses that have servers, and lots of us still do, you need a backup system, not just a program, not just an app that runs, but when I say a system, you need daily verification. You need to make sure that you don't think, hey, that backup's working, I don't need to worry about it. You need a written plan describing the recovery process and at least an annual test to verify that the backups are good. I've seen them before where it's got the green check mark and you go to use it and it doesn't work. There has to be a process. This is a little screenshot from one of the tools that we use, and it tells us some information about latest screenshot, which we can verify that it booted up properly, that there's offsite backups, that there's local backups, how long ago this happened, how many of the most recent backups work. So there are tools available if you have servers to verify those types of backups, and it's a really critical piece of infrastructure for any business. We got some questions ahead of time around OneDrive, Google, Dropbox. Those actually are great solutions. If set up properly, they go a long way towards improving the state of backup for users. Dropbox has gotten much better. I know a lot of people like to use Dropbox, and it had issues a few years ago where you could get a ransomware and not recover your data. I think they've improved that now. I haven't heard about that in a couple of years. So also a better solution. And you get this kind of a menu where you can restore from yesterday and go back. This does not work if you have a big database server, an Active Directory. But if you're just trying to protect files and you're a small business, these can be really great and inexpensive tools to make sure that you've got everything backed up. But again, this is you need to be trusting but verifying. And if you've got something stored to your desktop or in your downloads folder, that may not be in the place that you're backing up. It may not be in the OneDrive folder or the Google Drive or Dropbox folder, and you could get ransomware on your computer. Your computer could get lost or stolen or damaged, and you could lose the data that way. So that's why I say you need a system, you need a process to verify that the things that are important to you are indeed backed up and recoverable if you need them. Okay. So I'm going to jump onto my second recommendation, which is multi-factor authentication. And that's a mouthful. Maybe you've heard of it. It's starting to gain more popularity, the term in kind of public discourse, but I'm going to delve into that. And that requires a quick detour into phishing. Again, another industry term of art, but hopefully it's made its way to you. And let's talk about what phishing is. So one of these, another cyber attack trend, they analyzed over 3,000 security incidents. Far and away, over 80% of the attacks involved phishing. And then we've got behind that this idea of pretexting, which is getting into a phone call where information gets exchanged. So why is phishing so popular? Why is that the number one result? Well, there's a couple of reasons. One, they don't have to be successful that many times because email is essentially free. So I can send out 1 million phishing attempts. And you can see here the percent of people that click on those fake emails is about 3%. So I'm not great at math, but 3% of 1 million is enough to make a living. And so that's why phishing is such a common tool. Every day we open up this drawbridge. We protect our networks with firewalls network security. We create this big barrier, and then we open this drawbridge, which is email. Anyone can email us. You don't need to be invited into our inbox. Everyone who has junk mail knows that you can get as much junk mail as the world wants to send you. And because it's this communication line for our vendors and our customers and our colleagues, we have to keep it open. But if you see here, so the malware types and delivery methods, 94% of malware is delivered via email. It's just the easiest method to get information into the hands of your victim. So what is a phishing attack? It works like this. Step one, a user receives an email with a malicious attachment, or they click on an infected link. The attacker uses that fake site or the malware to collect user credentials. And then the malware either encrypts the drive with ransomware, installs some other kind of virus, or they use those stolen credentials to steal data or money. But it all starts with you getting involved with an email that you shouldn't be, you should just be deleting or ignoring. Here's some examples of what that can look like, so you know some of the telltale signs. So here's an email that I collect these. It's kind of a hobby of mine. People, my customers like to send me examples. And you can see here, this was to a customer, and it says from, if you notice up here, front desk notification. Well, is it really from front desk notification? It says it's actually from Alejandro Briseño at Roper.es. Nobody was expecting an email from a Spanish front desk. So, these are the telltale signs, things to look for is who's it from and where is it sending you to? Those are the two big tells and red flags to look out for. And when you click on the attachment, let me click there. It sends you to this website called something.awesomefire.com. So that's what I mean when I say, where is it sending you to? You know how you can hover over a link before you click it, and it'll tell you where it's sending you to. Really important to think about where it's sending you to, because those can be really important tells to explain, to understand when something's a social engineering, a phishing attempt or not. I clicked on this link in a sandboxed environment. Sandbox just means a protected environment, because I was just curious to see. And the antivirus, even on this sandboxed site, fortunately protected me. So I didn't go any further. I knew it was no good. It was trouble. But so you can get warnings from this, like this, from Firefox, from I think Safari, Chrome. So there's more tools. The internet is trying to, the vendors out there are trying to protect you. But if you didn't have this warning, you could be sent to a site that looked like a proper login site. Maybe you hand over your credentials and now they can get into your email. Here's some more examples. So this is one this is to me from Office 365 allegedly. They put the logo in there, say, oh, quarantine notification, release messages. Well, this is not a tool that I actually use, but they're betting enough people use Office 365 and would fall for this. But if you look closely, who's it coming from? It's coming from dvaughn at exponef.org. It's not coming from Microsoft. So who is it coming from? It's not really Microsoft. Where is it sending me to? It's the cdkglobal.com. Again, not Microsoft. So where's it coming from? Not Microsoft. Where is it sending me to? Not Microsoft. So I can just delete it, ignore it, move on with my life. Here's another one, allegedly from Melanie Evans, but you can see it's really from Del C. Thorpe njj@mail.com, either a hacked or just a free made up account that they sent and then gave the name Melanie Evans. Apparently that sounded enticing to them. And then if you click on the PDF attachment, let's see what it says. It opened this invoice. This is an example of pretexting. So I thought this is a really odd, spam attempt. What do they really want? I did a little bit of digging. There's a phone number up here. What they want you to do is call. This was somebody who reported this on the same phone number, the same scam online from a few months earlier, saying that they called. They're trying to get you to give up your credit card number. So this is an example of pretexting where they actually take you out of the digital environment into the real world, but they're happy to take your money via whatever mechanism you're willing to participate in. So just be aware, there's all kinds of scams out there, but who is it coming from? Where is it sending you to? Did you get involved? Did you really buy anything from MyNet Pharma? If not, just delete it, move on with your life. Here's another one I got that I thought was pretty good because the from address looks like it's coming from Amazon. I didn't really do too much digging to figure out how they did that because all I did was hover over the the to address where it says view deals, and I could see it sending me to channelhomesales.com. It's not really Amazon. I'm not really getting a gift card. Delete it, move on. This was another one from Steady Networks Connect saying I had a 28-second long voicemail. This is not our voice system, so I knew it was fake, but I was curious where it was going to send me to, and I clicked into this link, and then this link took me to another link, and then I don't know if you can see this, but it was sending me to a fake login page, Microsoft.oa365.xyz, not really Microsoft. So, be aware, they're going to try to make it look like something valid. Really common. Yes.
There is a question for you.
Go ahead.
Are there any ways to identify a phishing attempt through a social network messaging service such as LinkedIn?
It's going to be those same tells. Who's it coming from? Is it someone you know and trust? And always remember that they could be hacked too. So that's only kind of half the picture. And then where is it sending you to? When it sends you there, is it trying to get you to open an application? Is it trying to get you to enter username and password? But absolutely, a messaging center, Facebook messaging, LinkedIn messaging would use these same tactics, and I'm sure they're out there where you accept somebody as a friend you don't know, they message you and send you to a link that does this same process. So here's another one, allegedly from I've got a million of these, and I think this is my last one. Telling me I've got to rectify a password expiration, but it's really coming from CEO Juice at Arthur office at JPL, and it's sending me to piba.org.brazil. So who's it coming from? Where is it sending me to? These are great red flags telling me where to avoid. And this is what those fake login sites look like. But if you look at the top at where the actual URL, what the website is, it's not Microsoft. Don't enter your information. It's not Gmail, it's PacificRimPizza.com, and their site got hacked, and that's how you get these fake login sites. So just be aware. Look at the top of the screen and see where it's really sending you to. I'm going to keep going. I've got, like I said, we can go all day with these examples. Here's another one. It looks like Outlook, but it's really rightblinds.net. Their website was insecure. It got hacked. Now it gets used as this sort of zombie site that's actually serving up malware. And when you type in your username and password, it goes into a database, and now they've got your password. So now we're back from our quick detour to phishing. And now I'm going to show you the power of multi-factor authentication. So what it is in the security world, there are 3 and really 4 types of authentication. The one we're most comfortable or familiar with is type 1, which is something you know. It's a password. It's your first car. It's your grandmother's favorite color. And for years now, we've been told, oh, we need your password, and then you have to answer one of these questions. But that is not truly multi-factor authentication, because they're both from the same type family. So really, do you want to get out of this medium of something you know, because someone could figure out your grandmother's favorite color or your first car, or they can hack that from somewhere else. So what you really want is something you have, physical device in the real world. It can be a USB dongle, it can be a mobile phone, and now you've got a type 1 and a type 2. That's true multi-factor authentication. You get into Sandia or Los Alamos Labs, and they're going to have secure places that are also something you are, type 3, which is a fingerprint, iris, or retinal scan. And there's also type 4, which is some place that you are, where you can only access certain information based on where you are online. So here's some examples. Maybe you've seen these RSA secure codes. This is really technology from about 20 years ago, and it's being replaced rapidly because it's so much easier to have these types of codes on your phone. Keys, USB keys that you plug in, or secure cards that have, for the labs, they do that. These are all examples of something you have. And your cell phone, your mobile phone is considered something you have as well. So that's why your bank will send you a text message, or Amazon will send you an OTP, a one-time password to your phone, because it's considered something that you have. It takes something from both of those categories. My favorite is authentication apps. Google has one. We're going to talk about a few others. But it's the same idea as the RSA code that you see here, but now it's come to the digital phone or the mobile phone world where it's much more accessible, much less expensive. These apps are free. So multi-factor authentication, it's also, you may hear it called two-step authentication. Again, two-step might be more where you log in because you have a username and password, and then they send you an email. It's not really from two typed classes, but it's definitely better than just knowing your username and password. Sometimes it's called an OTP or a one-time password. And it prevents access even if your password is stolen. That's why it's so powerful, is because in all of those examples I gave with the phishing attempt, let's say you fall for it. Let's say they made a really convincing email and you end up sending them your username and password. Well, they've got the keys to the kingdom unless you protected it with this other second factor. And so we recommend it for all web applications because without that second factor, even if they have your username and password, they can't get in. And it's becoming easier and more convenient all the time. SMS texting, like most bank websites do, it's pretty good. It has some weaknesses. So it's not considered the gold standard. The weakness is really that someone could socially engineer Verizon and get their phone number switched over to their cell phone. That tends to be a much higher target attack, but it's something to be aware of. And authentication apps are considered much better. It's not yet built into every web application, but we're seeing a growing use case for it. So you'll start to see this more often. I highly recommend it for any Gmail or Office 365 account because it's free and it's built in. All right, let's jump to password management. So we talked about your username and password, you get phished, you didn't have multi-factor authentication, or you did, but someone's gonna document that password. So the big question is, where does that go? What good is it to have for them to steal your password? Well, they're doing the work for all of humanity because when they steal those passwords, they don't just keep them to themselves because they have value and they can sell them on the black market or what's called the dark web, sort of the web equivalent of the black market. This is a headline from last week. The largest collection of passwords ever has been leaked online, 8.4 billion passwords. And I don't know if you would think that one of your passwords would be out there on the dark web or not, but let's talk about my passwords. So there's this interesting website, I think it's owned by 1Password, which is a password management tool called Have I Been Pwned? Pwned is just an old gaming term for being killed in a video game, basically. And so haveibeenpwned.com is this website where you can type in your email address, and it doesn't publish your passwords or anything, but it does tell you whether or not your email address shows up in their database of, I think, certainly billions, they may be up to trillions of passwords at this point that are being harvested from the dark web and just put into a searchable database so that you can know, okay, is my password out there or not? In my case, I don't know if you can see this, but my password was found 7 times. My username and password, email address and password was found 7 times in their database. Should this terrify me is the question. Well, it doesn't, and here's why. Because here's some examples. I have another tool that lets me see, exactly where these breaches came from. And I can see this one came from cafepress.com, which is a custom t-shirt website I've used. This one came from house.com, which is just an interior design website. And then this one, covey.com. I don't know what that one is, but they claim to have my email address and password. So what do I do about that? How do I get rid of that? How do I clear that off the dark web? Well, the fact is, how do we stop it? We can't. I can't get my password off there. There's nothing I can do about it. It's already in this dark web database. There's no way for me to get into the dark web database and clear it off. But what I can do is make every password unique. If they steal my cafepress.com website, I just changed the password for that website. I just changed that password. Well, what if you like to use the same password for everything? Well, then that's really bad and really dangerous. So here's how you can avoid doing that. And it's with the password manager. So a password manager, I'm going to throw some examples up here. As Keeper, LastPass, Dashlane, Log Me Once. Let's see, we've got 1Password, RoboForm, Sticky Password, Zoho, McAfee, Password Boss. Somebody asked about Google Password Manager. There's iCloud Keychain. These are all reasonable alternatives. I'm going to walk you through LastPass. It's the one that I use, and I'm very comfortable with it, but they all have generally the same function and the same concept. So if you have a different product you want to use, by all means, but this is why they're so valuable. So here's how it works. Choose a plan for you, that you get a family plan. And this is what I did for my family. So even my 13-year-old daughter now has LastPass, so that she's getting off on the right foot and not making everything our dog's name plus her birthday. And so you can also get these plans for your business if you want to share passwords with your business colleagues instead of your personal family members. So here's what it does. You sign up, and when you sign up, you have a master password. Now, this master password is the one password that has to be completely unique. You can't use it on any other website. You can't have used it. It can't be a simple one. It should be complex. It needs to be memorable by you. And you should use MFA, that same technique of using multi-factor authentication that we use on our email and all these web apps. You should absolutely use it on this as well, because it's going to be the keys to the kingdom. So you sign up for your LastPass or whatever password manager you want, and you install a browser extension. This is why these are so valuable and so useful, because you can kind of take them with you. So we install our browser extension, and then it kind of shows up in the top right of your browser, and now you log in with your email and password. So now as you're browsing the web, and maybe you have this installed on a personal computer and a business computer and your phone, now you've got this access to this database of passwords, and you don't have to keep remembering them and making them memorable to be your dog and your birthday. You can make them look like this %725. It generates these passwords on the fly. And if every website you use has a unique and a randomized password, then it doesn't matter if Cafe Press leaks your password, gets hacked, and they leak that password onto the web, because you've only used it once. The value of it being unique and unmemorable is that they can't compare it to some big database of other passwords and interpret it. I've looked for these. I've actually gone through the process of trying to find these types of passwords on the web, on the dark web, and they're not there. They really are random, and they would take years and years of computing power to reverse engineer. So that's the value of it. Anyone gets hacked, you just delete it, create a new password and move on with your life. The other great thing is that this all synchronizes to your phone, to your home computer, your business computer. So you're not ever in a position where you're without a password but need access to one of these websites. And LastPass, another thing I like about it is it has its own multi-factor authentication app, which you can sync to your username and password for the app, and use it for Microsoft and Google and all these other logins. So I find it to be a really valuable tool to have available. Those password managers doesn't cost very much and has a huge impact, because if your password gets stolen, whether you know it or not, if you're reusing those passwords, they're going to be out there on the dark web. I'm going to tell one last little story about the password manager, which is that the Colonial Pipeline was actually attack was traced back to one password that was found on the dark web. That these hackers, they found this password and they tried it and it worked, and they got a toehold into the Colonial Pipeline network. And because they were not using a password manager, it was probably, whether it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or something simple or something complex, because it was out there on the dark web, and it was not being updated. That's how they got in. So if you think that these attacks aren't being used in the real world, they really are. All right, we're going to move on to patching and updating. And the reason why I have this a little lower down the list for, hopefully clear from the reasons I've explained, but patching it's free, so it does have a low cost in that sense, but it has a higher cost when you have a network of, when you own a business, you have a network of computers that you have to manage, and the bigger that network is, the harder and the more costly that practice becomes. And it's not a fail-safe, but it is an important tool. So let's talk a little bit about that. Patching itself is also not set it and forget it. So many times I've had people tell me, well, I have automatic updates turned on, and for a million reasons, it's not working. So there has to be a managed process, not just assumed process that it's working. It's critical for Windows PCs and Mac OS as well. Patching is the first step. Whenever you clear a virus, what they want you to do is update your operating system to prevent all the viruses. You use this little software update tool if you're using Windows. Similar in Mac, I'm sure you get bombarded on a daily basis if you're on a Mac with these updates. So what are these updates doing? Well, there's two types of updates for modern operating systems. Feature updates come about every 6 months from Microsoft, and they come every year or so from Apple. They give them their cool little names like Big Sur or Monterey. So feature updates have a lot of security features in them, but there's also something called security updates, and those happen much more often. These are the ones that we're really interested in updating on a rapid basis, because what's happening is there are processes out there that Apple uses, that Microsoft uses. There are actually people who get paid when they find a bug or a vulnerability. Apple will put a bounty out there. If you can find a vulnerability and they verify that it is, they will actually pay you money. So there's programmers whose whole job it is to search for these vulnerabilities. Then they send out a patch, a security update. That's why these are so important. And some of them are huge gaping holes, and some of them are much smaller. But these security updates are coming out constantly, and that's why they're so valuable to keep up to date. Feature updates, I know people are hesitant because they can reduce the speed and the functionality of an old computer. They say, I know if I update this computer, it's gonna brick it, and it's not gonna be very usable anymore. So, as a result, a personal computer that works perfectly fine, works as well as the day it was born, it may only last 5 to 8 years. And we recommend a much shorter life cycle of 3 to 5 years for business computers. So unfortunately, a little bit the cost of doing business, cost of working on the internet. If we never got on the internet, you could use that computer forever and never have to update it and never worry about it. But the fact is that these patches and these security updates are there for a reason, and they will, have an impact on and a cost associated with them, because they're going to make an old computer feel older and slower faster. Let's talk quickly about antivirus. So antivirus, my next recommendation, I'm going to say the same thing. It needs to be on every computer, and that means you need some method of auto deploying or auditing that antivirus is deployed. I talk to so many businesses where they say, well, we've got a McAfee subscription, don't worry about it. And it's on 30 or 40% of the computers because they didn't have a process to audit or auto deploy the antivirus. So that becomes really important part of the process. You need a reliable method to audit if you're not going to auto deploy. And what I will say, I'm going to get this question too, which antivirus should I use? Most commercial antivirus is just fine. When we throw a few logos up here: WebRoot, ESET, Malwarebytes, Trend Micro, Kaspersky, Bitdefender, Norton, McAfee. There are many, many more. It's big business because you need this constant subscription. So there's a lot of incentive for companies to get involved with writing antivirus. And I would say they're all pretty good. My main concern when I'm testing an antivirus is speed and manageability. Some of them work better on PCs, some of them work better on Macs. If you have a mixed environment, you have to find one that does a good job on both, because you don't want to have your whole network, grinding to a halt because you installed a so-so antivirus. So, they do require a little bit of real-world testing to see which one's a fit for you. But because they're all pretty good at blocking viruses, I don't worry too much about that piece. I worry much more about, does it let me, get my work done? Many block bad websites as well. You saw that screen hopefully earlier from my WebRoot, which has a little plugin for the browser. Another really nice feature that's becoming more and more prevalent in good antivirus. The other thing I'll say is layering antivirus with other antivirus products tends to be a problem. We saw this a few weeks ago with one of our customers who had one antivirus product, and we tested putting ours on because we were having trouble removing theirs, and it just blue screened the computer. It broke the computer. So I would say definitely don't put two antivirus products, but there are other sort of adjacent security products. One's called an EDR, an endpoint detection and response system. Those can play well with antivirus. There's DNS filtering applications. Those can play well. VPN doesn't affect antivirus, so you can put those on. So there are some companion tools, but two antiviruses is not better than one. All right, let's see where we're doing on time. Pretty good. Recommendation number 6, cyber liability insurance. So this one's a little further down on the line on my list because it's a really important tool. I make sure that all of my customers have some version of cyber liability insurance in place, but it's not going to stop anything. It's not going to protect your data. All of these other tools are going to go a lot further to actually preventing a serious problem from happening. But just like you need to have insurance on your house, even though you have fire extinguishers and emergency shutoffs on heaters and things like that, you want to prepare, especially if you have a business that's just too much at stake and the cost is low enough at this point that it's still worth having this protection in place. So talk to your insurance broker. There's lots of local options. There's national options. There's probably people in the Better Business Bureau that you can talk to, get some references as well. My recommendation personally is $1 million limit. It doesn't cost $1 million to get $1 million limit on your cyber liability insurance. And I've seen a few cases. We've taken customers over who had big ransomware events, and they were really thankful. And one of them I was talking to yesterday, who had a $10,000 deductible, and they could not have been happier that they had cyber liability insurance. It really did a lot to save them. We implemented all of these controls for them after they hired us after the ransomware event. So I still recommend that, but they were very glad to have this in place. Here's
I have another question for you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you consider Windows Defender to be reliable enough to use as antivirus? The modern Defender, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, Windows Defender is a pretty good antivirus. They have an advanced threat protection tool, which is as good as any other antivirus out there. The basic Windows Defender is pretty good, but if you can get the advanced threat protection ATP, it really bumps it up to being more like one of those other commercial products. But yeah, Windows Defender is a perfectly good tool. Like I said, they're all pretty good at blocking viruses. It's really about what makes your computer function.
Thank you.
So some of the things to look for with cyber liability insurance, breach response is that means if you had a breach, that they have some tools available for helping respond to that. Regulatory defense, that means in New Mexico, we have, if you have personal health information that gets out because of a breach of your network, you've got a deadline of, I think, 180 days to disclose that publicly. So when Presbyterian got hit, they had to notify 180,000 individuals personally. So you need some kind of regulatory defense to help offset the cost of mailing 180,000 people. That's what that is about. Payment card liability. So if because they can impact you in all these crazy different ways, it's hard to predict. That's why you need to have all these different pieces in place. Data and network loss. So you may need some help recovering backups or things like that. And there's some cost to defer and defray some of those costs that you need to pay to get that data back. Business interruption loss. We had a law firm that we talked to that they were down for 2 days. because they were dealing with this ransomware. So even if they got their backups and they didn't lose any data and they didn't have to pay the ransom, there's other costs associated with an attack. Data recovery costs, we talked a little bit about. Cyber extortion loss, who's going to pay, that 10,000, 20,000, 100,000, $1 million, whatever it is, ransom, if it really comes to that. And the other interesting thing they have now on staff at the insurance companies is, negotiators. They're going to negotiate with these hackers and try to get that cost as low as possible so that they can pay the minimum they need to get your data back. Fraudulent instruction, another really common tactic we see that initiates with a phishing attempt or a successful phishing attack is we have employees, who are being spoofed, talking to their HR managers saying, hey, I want to change my direct deposit information. So please wire my next paycheck to this account in Malaysia. Or the other common one is, we're going to pay this vendor, but we're going to use a wire transfer instead of a check. That communication gets interrupted via a phishing attack. And now you have fraudulent instruction where someone has given you bad information about where to send money to. And then funds transfer fraud, similar to what we're talking about here. So these are just some of the line items to look for, to talk to your insurance agent about. Just make sure you have a comprehensive, and that you're not just doing cyber extortion loss, because even though that's kind of the one that gets all the headlines, there's lots of different ways that you can have a loss that you would want insurance to help protect you from. Number 7 is phishing training. Can also have an impact. Again, we've seen that so you can educate staff to identify phishing and can reduce the attack success rate. Adding something called an external sender notification. We do this for all of our customers. We send a little, I'm sure you've seen those back and forth. This is external sender. Don't open any links. Don't open any attachments. That's just something you can do, excuse me, at your email provider's side, just to notify your staff that, hey, if this looks like it's coming from the CEO and it says external sender on it, just know it's not really from the CEO. Training staff to spot and report phishing can be really helpful. There's some automated tools. There's lectures like what we've done today where people can get trained on it. And you can have a no email policy is what I really encourage to teach your staff. When you have a direct deposit or an ACH or any kind of wire transfer, you can't conduct that business over email. You have to pick up the phone with a predetermined phone number. That's the best defense to get out of that hacked channel of communication, get into a different channel of communication like a phone call. So let's recap some of these controls that we talked about. Again, this is my interpretation of what's the biggest impact for the lowest cost to implement. Number 1, backups with backup verification. And the reason why that's number 1 is because it really does neutralize ransomware attacks. They can steal all your information now. There's other things that they're doing now, which is exfiltrate your data, but you can't do it. You can't even negotiate with them if you have no backups. So it's really critically important to have those backups, and then you can just move on with, you can deal with the downtime, but you can avoid paying them if you have the backups that you don't even need their copy to reverse. Multi-factor authentication. Again, this neutralizes a successful phishing attack. Really critical, important tool, because if they steal your username and password, they still don't have access without that second factor. So really important, and this is really low cost to implement. Password managers, again, neutralizes stolen passwords found on the dark web. If you only use that password once and it gets compromised, if they haven't gotten access to everything your entire digital life. But if you use the same password everywhere, one stolen password can mean that they have access to everything. Patching policy reduces, I don't say neutralizes, but it reduces the vulnerability footprint of your network. Those programmers out there for Microsoft and Adobe and Apple are working really hard to update patch holes on a regular basis, but you've got to push the button to update those operating systems. Antivirus, critically important. It reduces the potential what's called potentially unwanted applications, PUAs, and having a good antivirus that's got up-to-date virus definitions is really valuable to prevent those kinds of attacks. Cyber liability insurance aids in recovery if the worst happens, and then phishing training can help reduce that attack surface so that your staff doesn't fall victim to phishing or pretexting, and they're just aware of what you're now aware of, which is looking at where the email is coming from, where is it sending to, can be really valuable in minimizing the likelihood of a successful attack. There's lots more things that you can do. So I know this isn't a comprehensive list, but I wanted to give you some of what I thought was the most important tools out there and techniques and tactics. If you have more questions, you can reach out to me. I've got my phone number here. I've got Victoria's phone number here. But I'm happy to open it up for some questions if anyone has any additional questions that you wanted to ask right now.
There was someone that sent over an email that had requested a clarification. Can two-step verification be set up on the cloud?
So yeah, the question is, can two-step verification be set up on the cloud? So as we talked about, two-step verification is sometimes synonymous with multi-factor authentication. Sometimes it just means when you try to log in, they're going to send you an additional email. So can it be set up on the cloud? It really depends on who the vendor is. So if the vendor, have built in this process, then it can be set up, and I encourage you to look for it and try to turn it on wherever possible. But if they haven't turned it on, if you're using a product that doesn't have it, there's nothing you can do to turn it on unless the product has it built in.
We have another question. Can you provide some more detail on the mechanics of how password managers work?
Yeah, so here I'll talk about LastPass as well. So the idea is that they are going to have to store your password. And so you may think, well, what if they get breached? Because you can imagine that there's this database of all of your passwords, these complex random passwords, and they're all sitting behind a locked door, and that locked door's key is your username and password. And what they store is not a clear text, plain text version of your password. They store an encrypted version of that, what's called a hash. Now, this is why it's so important to not use a common password like password 123. The hash, the encrypted version of password 123, is all over the web because people use it all the time. So it's very easy to reverse engineer what the encrypted version of password 123 is. But if your password is computer ID, I love Better Business Bureau, Albuquerque 2869444, probably no one's used that exact password before. And so even the encrypted version is not going to be stored anywhere out there. So it's okay. I don't want LastPass to get hacked, but even if they did, because I'm using a unique password for that master key, I'm still protected even if they get hacked, as long as that password is complex and unique enough that it's not out there commonly in the world. So hopefully that answers the question. I assume that's what they were thinking is, what's the mechanics of protecting your database of passwords, and that's what it is. They don't have your password, they have an encrypted version of your password, and that's why it gets protected. And that's why if you forgot your password, they can't uncover it. They can't reverse it for you. You do have to remember that password.
Thank you.
Did you have another question, Victoria?
Yeah, so back to kind of that, so with Face ID and like fingerprint ID, would that be considered type 1 if it's on your phone? Or?
It's technically type 3 because it's something you are. Yeah. I've done a little bit of research on this. I have a colleague who doesn't trust it because he claimed that it was, what if you use a picture? But the reality is, at least the way Apple on the phone has implemented it, it's not that easy to hack, and you're always about reducing attack surfaces. I use it. I've not seen any evidence that it's not a valuable and effective way to protect your information. You have to be looking at the camera. Your eyes have to be open. So, could it be hacked by you get knocked unconscious and someone props your eyes open? Potentially, yes. But you're dealing with likelihood, and we're also trying to do this interesting balance always in IT, which is on one side what makes it easy to use computers and what's protection. And the harder and the more protection you put in place, the harder it is to function on a day-to-day basis. So if you're looking for that balance, yes, I think it's a reasonable tool. If you have a higher security requirement, maybe you don't. Maybe you want to use a password, a unique password, and not use Face ID or thumbprint. But for most users, the likelihood of something happening is low enough that it's a useful trade-off. Any other questions?
Yes, there is another one.
Go ahead.
Quick message for if anyone's hiring for cybersecurity, I'm open to messages.
Okay, great. All right.
And likewise, if anyone wants to host a webinar, reach out.
Perfect.
All right, well, thank you so much for attending.
Is it
So wait, yeah, Brian's got a question or
We
wants
have
to make a.
our CEO and President Brian Bassa popping in real quick.
I'd be remiss if I didn't end this by thanking Jonathan for, this is the second time in the last, since the pandemic started, that he has come and presented for us or come here. I was so excited this morning, Jonathan, that you made the trip from Santa Fe even to come do it in our conference room. This information is very critical, and a lot of people think it isn't important until it happens to you. I just want to hear to verify to all of you that several years ago, when we were giving a building away to the Farmington Big Brothers and Big Sisters, Alan Marks of the Albuquerque Journal did a Sunday story on the scam of the week, and it was BBB Chief falls prey to intrusion. And I was fished. And not only was I fished, but once I opened that, all of my contacts in my whole email system were scammed as well. And that was a big deal that we had to go through in notifying everyone. So this is valid, very valid information. I'm so glad we included it on our topics, on our monthly webinars. And what was so fantastic about the way you present, Jonathan, is that you're able to do it in layman's terms for even people like me to understand. So we really appreciate you coming and doing this webinar with us today. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
All right, thanks.
All right, everyone, I'm going to go ahead.
Thank you, everyone.
End the recording and stop the meeting. Make sure to be on the lookout for our next webinar next month. Thank you.